a pleasure to be here amongst all of you in Kolkata. I've spent a better part of my childhood and then again came back to study in IIM Calcutta. So I have a lot of affection for the city, and I was asked us to share a little bit about my own journey, and I'll just go back a little and talk about when I started my first company, and since then what are the other businesses we've done and what are some of the challenges we faced. I've been in corporate for many years before I started my first startup. I was in predominantly in the tech sector. I was working with Microsoft in those days, and that's when I started my first company in 2000. At that time, obviously the tech sector was very big, and a lot of tech outsourcing was happening in India. And my role in Microsoft made me come very close, in close contact with a lot of technology startups, the big ones like Infi, but also a lot of small guys creating products which we wanted them to use the Microsoft technology. So that's how my own experience with startups began, by interacting with them. And but what I realized is that in that time, technology startups, there were plenty, and they continue to be, but I think the pace is a little bit grown a little lower, and it's or rather technology outsourcing was a big thing, and there were a lot and lots of startups who are coming up in that space. So what I looked for is there something which is similar but not quite the same, which uses the benefits that India has to offer, but on the other hand is not exactly replicating what a whole bunch of people were doing. And that's where the whole BPO concept came up. And we were one of the first companies to set up a BPO startup in the year 2000. It was called Customer Asset. We were lucky enough that literally from day one, we were able to start the company with funding. So we raised money and we started the company Customer Asset in April of 2000. It was not all roses along the way, I can tell you that, because 1999 was the first, 1999 and then 2000 was the first internet boom, followed by a very big bust. So what happened was, the whole thesis of what we had set up my BPO company was that we would provide support, outsource support to all the internet companies who need to provide customer support to their customers. But lo and behold, there were no internet companies. Where are you going to provide customer support? It used to be very, very disturbing that you go pitch to a company and they say, yeah, sounds great, your model is good, we'll work with you, etc., etc. You go back with a second pitch, company doesn't exist. That was the kind of situation. I mean, our clients were just sort of going off like bubbles in the air, and there were no clients left. So it's a real serious moment of truth. Big Basket is probably the most famous of the startups from our growth story platform, which we promoted in 2011, which is doing very well. And apart from that, we have Bluestone. And it's a real serious moment of truth. We had to then say, okay, this is horrible on one side, that what we set out to do is no longer possible. But the positive was that we had raised money, and the companies that are the investors who had backed us were saying, that's fine, we are not losing our faith in you as individuals. It's just that this model doesn't work, so what is it that you can do differently? So we had to pivot the company completely, and we became a call center from an online support company. So that was our first big moment of truth with Customer Asset. It was so that is what led to the genesis of Portia. We are a consumer healthcare services company which provide a whole variety of services to healthcare services to individuals, to consumers, which they can avail at home or at work or through technology. One of the learnings that we had, again, so one thing if you have noticed is that again there's a sector change. Moved from education to healthcare. Learn all over again. Humility, humility, humility. Absolutely the most important thing if you want to be a startup person. Realize that you don't know anything. You need people, the right people who can come with you and help you in building that business. Listen all the time carefully to the ecosystem players. I would have spent 6 months just talking to people across the sector, the entire healthcare sector, consumers, providers, doctors, hospitals, nurses, what have you. Just listen to people And that's when slowly the thesis starts to develop as what you can do. Really challenging for people. They are very happy to find other ways to shop. So can we fulfill that need? And so that's how Big Basket came in. And I'll talk a little bit about Portia, which I run full time as the CEO. So Portia, we started in the year 2013. It is in the area of healthcare. So when I personally in 2013, I said, yeah, I've exited from an operating role. We have a portfolio of companies, but I was still very clear that I wanted to be the founder and be the person running another company, so be absolutely hands-on and fully involved. So we looked at what spaces. Healthcare in India, there are always plenty of problems to be solved, many ways in which you can solve those. A lot of focus and lot of investments have gone into the big hospital infrastructure-led space. But outside of hospital care is something which is quite broken. It's not something which is organized. It doesn't have good quality or branded players there. So that felt like a big open space. So looking at a big call center, lots of telecom, lots of people, that kind of a model which requires lots more of capital. So we raised a couple of rounds, but then we decided it made more sense for the company to be part of a larger platform which has the ability to fund that. So we sold the company to ICICI. It became ICICI OneSource, and then now it is listed as FirstSource, doing very well. It's probably the third largest in the country in terms of unaffiliated call center or BPO businesses. Then exiting from that, I spent a few years back in the corporate space, but again in a startup kind of a role. I was a founding CEO for Tesco to set up their offshore platform in India, in Bangalore. So we set up their technology and BPO and transaction processing, all of that, very large facility. I set it up for them in Bangalore. That was the beginning of the whole BPO culture in India, and we were probably one of the few who actually created that whole industry in the year 2000. I had also a very personal challenge, or I wouldn't say challenge, but circumstance which made it even more difficult. I had a 6-month-old baby, so it is not enough if your clients are questioning you and your employees, but you also have a small baby which is questioning you. So it was a very, very interesting time, and personally as well as professionally. So we built the company. We had a remarkable success. Instead of going head-on into the US market, we went into the UK market, and we got a lot of success because a lot of our competition were targeting US. We decided to target UK, so we were able to get off the ground faster. So that was another big learning for us, finding a space, differentiating ourselves, making a quick turnaround when things are not going the right way, finding a market which is just a bit different so that you can make your entry quickly. Those are some of the quick learnings out of customer asset. In 2007, I think I moved on to my second startup, called Tutor Vista, which was into the education space. Tutor Vista had already been started by then by Ganesh, who is also my husband, and another partner of ours called Srini. The two of them started Tutor Vista. I joined them as a third partner in 2007-2008 to set up the India business for Tutor Vista, which was also looking at here. I think the important learning which we used and which helped us make a very solid business was that the model that applies to the international part of our business is not the same model that we should apply in India. Now let me explain what I mean by that. Tutor Vista, when we started Tutor Vista, when Ganesh started Tutor Vista, the idea was to look at the Indian teachers and see can Indian teachers using technology provide one-to-one tutoring services and tutoring support to students in the other markets. So US was the biggest market, UK, about 28 countries, we were providing tutoring to individual students. Highly B2C driven business against a BPO business which is all B2B. This was a completely B2C, creating visibility, brand for a company from India to provide tutoring to American students. Very, very challenging, but extraordinarily successful. But when we started to look at what can we do in the Indian market, it was very clear that that model in India in those days would not have worked. Today you see there are online tutoring companies which are in place, But 10 years back, that was not a model that was absolutely not likely to be viable, because the mobile penetration was not that great. Internet was not that ubiquitous. It was still a desktop-based, at-home, shared computer amongst various people. In that kind of environment, to create a one-on-one tutoring on demand in India was not the most sensible business. So we had a very different approach to India, which was around using technology to enable schools to improve the quality of teaching, to set up tutoring centers, the brick and mortar tutoring centers, again using technology. And the third was, if you put all of this together, can you actually run schools? So before, towards the end, I had about 35 brick and mortar schools that I was running with, which we had about 40,000 students who are studying in our schools, CBSE schools, regular schools. We had about 3,000 schools which are using our technology platform, and we had close to 100 tutoring centers which were using the technology platform again. So the things that my customers kept telling me is that, you're doing this one thing, but I have 20 problems. I have to still run pillar to post. Can you become my go-to service provider? And that's what brought in a whole bunch of other things and make it more comprehensive for them. The second thing I heard from my customers is that today I don't want, but tomorrow I might need 6 months later. But if you stay in touch with me, it will help me, because I know that you can bring something to the table at that time. So we created a very strong engagement model with our customers. Now this is very different from a typical healthcare company. If you look at hospitals, their model is episodic. Somebody comes in with a knee replacement, you do a fantastic job, send them home. That's it. That ends your relationship with them. Our model is work with them for life, work with their families, keep talking to them, finding out what their problems are, see how you can solve the problems. Some you can solve and monetize, some you just solve because they are there, and hopefully you will be able to monetize in some time. So this continuous listening, growing with the customers has been a theme across the board. The other thing, given that this particular panel is about funding, we've been fortunate that we've raised a lot of capital in all the companies that I run directly. We've managed to raise good capital. But in our portfolio of companies, there have been situations where we've not been able to raise. We've had to pivot. We have put some of our companies together so that the model makes sense, because one on its own is not working. So this continuously being flexible to change what is not working and to morph it into something else which is likely to be more attractive to the customers firstly, and hence to the investors, that is something I think is a critical learning for us along the journey. I think I'm running out of time, so I should... Yeah, no, it's okay. You should have time to speak, ask questions as well. But so it's been, it's always a roller coaster ride if you're in a startup. There is never a moment when you can say, okay, now it's all done and everything is great. There is always a new challenge, but that's what makes it exciting. So it is this journey is for people who are looking for that excitement, who are not faced by it, by the challenges. Every day is different. There's always a new challenge. Even if I have built so many companies and given exit to so many investors, even now it's a challenge to raise another round. We just finished, and so I'm happy that we finished raising, but it was challenging. You still have to go and pitch your story. You still have to convince investors. You still have to fight for capital in the market, even if you are an extremely experienced and credible entrepreneur. So having that ability to stick on and persevere in whatever the situation is, and keep working at it, keep listening to the customers, I think that those are some of my big learnings out of my journey. And with that, I'll hand it back to Kalyan.